Hi, this is my diversity and professional practice interview. My name is Rachel Landolt, and I've titled this Look Beyond the Single Story. I interviewed Sara Anwar Khalifa, coordinator for orientation and new student programs at University of Houston Clear Lake. As you can see in this picture, Sara is an Arab American Muslim female. Part of her experiences include that she graduated from Texas A&M University with an undergraduate and bachelor's degree. During her undergraduate years, she was an orientation leader at Texas A&M University, as well as a NASPA undergrad fellowship. She did work at the University of Tyler with their veteran services, has worked in residence life, and held a NOTA internship at Georgia Tech University before coming to University of Houston Clear Lake. Part of her duties as coordinator includes orientation and transition programming, developing a first-year success plan, implementing family programming, organizing Welcome Week activities, and she chooses to be involved on campus by volunteering at leadership retreats and being LGBT Safe Zone trained. So as part of my questions, I'll give a shout out to Taylor for her question on how would you describe the campus climate at your university. University of Houston Clear Lake, home of the Hawks, experienced quite a bit of transition recently. It has gone through what's called a downward expansion, which is somewhat unusual for most schools. Basically, they were an upperclassmen institution, and starting the fall of 2014, they added their first freshman and sophomore classes. With this came the new Department of Orientations and New Student Programmings, or ONSP, which Sara is a part of. The next question that I used is from Ashley, which talks about roughly how many students did your department directly serve each semester and of what ethnicity? Sara was happy to report that UHCL is quite a diverse campus. They have commuter students, non-traditional students. They are an HSI campus, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a second. They're primarily first-generation students with a very large international student population, and they are 70% female and 30% male. A shout out goes to Jesse with his question on what is your definition of diversity. And Sara reported that the ONSP staff do give an accurate portrayal of diversity in her opinion, in which several different individuals are able to work together and promote diversity to the students by serving as a role model on working with and accepting different individuals. Their director, Dr. Rick's wife, Angie Montalongo, is a Latina female. Their coordinator is an Arab American Muslim, Sara. They do have an administrative assistant who is a gay white male, a student worker who is an Asian Indian male, and they have 32 orientation leaders, 15 of which are international students, and they are 50 to 50 male-female ratio with those orientation leaders. So I combined two questions from Luann and Amber. Amber asked, how do you promote cultural competency development among your staff? And Luann asked a similar question in regards to how one trains their employees on ethnicities and cultural awareness. And Sara addressed this through her training for her orientation leaders. And from her own background, she states that it's easy for individuals to look at her garb and automatically assume that she is very aware of Arab culture, and when in actuality she grew up in East Texas in a predominantly white middle class community. So she did not actually experience cultural development towards her Arab background until she attended Texas A&M University. So she uses this experience to talk to her orientation leaders about being cognizant of all backgrounds and to move beyond their first impressions. She encourages them to use inclusive language, and part of their development is she works them through some reflection on their own identity, which, as we know from our multicultural textbook, that helping individual students recognize and appreciate their own culture is the first step in allowing them to recognize and appreciate other cultures. And that's a quote from page 17 in our textbook. So from that standpoint, it reminds me a lot of our own salient identity charts in which we talked about recognizing our own identity. So as a part of her training, she does include a TED Talk by Chimamanda Adichie titled The Danger of a Single Story. And I'm going to play a little bit of this here because I think it'll show you kind of this theme of that Sara tries to teach in open discussion with her orientation leaders on not falling into the trap of making judgments based on your assumptions. So as you can see, when this young lady came to the States, she experienced some racial profiling that maybe Sara herself experienced based on her identity and the physical appearance that she portrays. And so she uses these two resources, her own experience in this, to have a discussion with her students, which I think is highly appropriate because they have such a large international student population, but also because, it's very easy for us to make judgment calls, as we have talked about in this class. Now, the next question I used from one of my own, which talked about how Sara managed to create an atmosphere of cultural acceptance despite her own cultural identity. And I based this slide on the multiculturalism competency model on page 14 in our Multiculturalism on Campus textbook, in which there are 3 attributes: awareness, understanding, and appreciating and valuing. And I see that Sara is definitely at a point of understanding. Using her own experiences, she has developed the ability to see things from multiple perspectives. And she encourages her students to think of things from more of a their own identity as a collective whole, going back to that activity that we did in our class where we looked at our different identities and how they made up the greater whole of just ourselves. And she states that as professionals, we must be open to differences in our students in order to create a sense of belonging, which I think goes in line with that level of understanding and accepting different perspectives. So she goes on to describe a situation that she found herself in, which to me I think shows that next level of appreciation and valuing, in which she volunteered at the leadership retreat in order to engage and build a relationship with her students. As part of that retreat, there were many, icebreaker activities, and she noticed that there was a student that was rather shy. And she chalked it up to, I guess that student doesn't like to talk in front of people, and she says it's funny now because she realizes she was making some judgment calls there. At the end of the retreat, she communicated an open door policy to the students she had been working with. And then she was very surprised that the first student to take her up on that open door policy was this shy student who came to her office and ended up basically coming out as a lesbian. And she was challenged as a student because she was a Christian, but she very much wanted to explore this new identity by being a part of the Unity Club. But she wasn't sure how her Christian group and identity would accept that. And so Sara and her talked and worked through that. Sara was happy to report that now the student is the president of the Unity Club. She was able to eventually come out to her Christian community, and they have accepted that. And she is also an orientation leader. So this is an example of a very successful identity development case that Sara worked with, that she can use as an example of helping students become multiculturally competent. So my next question that I asked her was in regards to white racial identity, and I asked Sara to describe a time that she worked with white privileged students that were maybe struggling with accepting their privileged status. And she talked about a example that she had from working at Texas A&M University, in which she worked with the freshman leadership organizations, or what's known as FLOs. And these FLOs are organizations that students are able to be a part of, and they are by a selection process. So not everybody that wants to be a part of are able to. And what she noticed was that there were 2,300 students who were involved in FLOs, but there were only 10 minority students. Now that's not a percentage, that was exactly 10 minority students, and she was very surprised by this. So she started asking the question, why are minority students and students of colors not applying? It was a blind system for selection, so it wasn't like racial discrimination was exactly happening, but she felt that there was some kind of miscommunication going on. So she started planting the seeds of awareness with her FLO leaders. And she said there was mixed reactions. There were some individuals that were like, I don't understand why we have to do this and why we need to make this an issue. And then there were other ones that looked at it and said, yes, this is absolutely an issue. We're on board with changing this. So she said it was kind of an interesting experience, and that there were very much some individuals. And this is a picture from A&M's website that shows one of the FLO groups. And as you can see, it is definitely not diverse. So my last question for Sara was in regards to University of Houston Clear Lake being an HSI institution, and I asked what are ways that their department are working to encourage retention and persistence in the Latino student population. And she talked about one of the biggest things that they do are providing support from the very beginning. She said that's usually where you lose a lot of your Hispanic students, is just because that getting started point. And so providing that orientation is a key part in retaining them. She also talked about that they have the family orientation, and that is a part of the retention, because that student population is very communal, and so their family support is very important to their success. And so they teach the family members about what the student is going to experience, how to support the student. Finally, they have, she was very strong about needing engagement outside the classroom, that these students will need that. And so they've started a faculty engagement plan in which she's gone to the different departments and talked with them about how faculty can start volunteering with these students, so that it's not just student services staff that are interacting with them all the time, but also the faculty. And one example of that is this Mingle and Minchies. So the Mingle and Minchies was a time that they could have the faculty give study tips in a fun, informal way. So here's my reference list. And that is the end of my presentation. And thank you, and have a great evening.